Ofer, welcome back to Mitiga Mic.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Now, it's a real pleasure to have you on board. You're our first repeat, which makes a lot of sense being our CTO, and you have a lot to add. But I want to jump right into today's discussion. There's been a lot of talk about AI. In particular, AI as it relates to detection and response, or what people are calling AIDR. So first off, what is AIDR? What's all this about?
So that's a great question, because what I've learned in the last few months is that a lot of people use the same term to describe completely different things. Yeah. And it's not new, of course, right? Because people like the buzzwords, right? The XDR, CDR, AIDR, and all that. But really, they think about different things. So before we dive into that, I'd like to suggest my own classification into three things, and like, everything good in life is divided into three things, and these are very broad strokes, right? Because we can break it up to 50 things, but I want to start with those big three pillars that I think distinguish between different aspects of detection and response and AI intersection, right? And so the first intersection of AI and detection and response is using AI for detection and response. And I think that's probably the most discussed right now, probably the most implemented right now. We've seen millions of startups going into this space. And basically it says, look, we have this problem, detection and response, trying to detect when a threat actor, somebody malicious, does bad things in our endpoint, EDR, network, NDR, cloud, CDR.
Not necessarily an attack that's AI centric, just
no.
Good guys using AI to detect bad things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And we can use AI to help triage. We can use AI to better detect anomalies. I mean, we've been using AI for many years, right? But when now people say AI, they mean Gen AI, right? Yeah. But it's really about leveraging this, transformative, spectacular technology of AI to do the work. And if you look at this space of detection and response, right, it's probably what a lot of people who start their career in security is the first thing they learn, right? It's the most entry-level job as a SOC analyst. And that's where AI shines, in taking those things that are repetitive and tedious and done by people with starting skills, and letting AI do that, right? And so AI for detection and response is it's great.
And you made a really subtle comment there, and I just want to double click on that. You said leveraging generative AI, but we use that in conjunction, and we use it at Mitiga, but organizations, security companies use it in general. Other things that have been maybe classified wrongly or correctly as AI or first gen, things like anomaly detection, pattern discovery, volumetric analysis, temporal analysis, all these great things that we've had for decades, that's still part of the equation, right? When we look,
of course, I mean, machine learning. Somebody smart told me the other day that at some point you stop talking about the new technology with the name of the new technology, and you start talking about what it does, right? So detecting malicious behavior with anomaly detection is a use of AI, right? But you don't say AI anymore because you say what it does, right? And so I think, right now, Gen AI is all the new buzz. Everybody's excited. Over time, we'll just get used to the applications that it gives us. But it's transformative. Using Gen AI for detection and response is transformative. There's still an ongoing discussion, the whole autonomous SOC notion. Is it going to be fully autonomous? Is it going to be, people augmented with AI? I've seen opinions here and there. But either way, we're going to take a big chunk of what historically only people could do and let AI do it, and make us much better at detection and response.
Okay. So that's one of the pillars that you mentioned.
That's one of the pillars.
Leveraging. Okay, got it. What's number two?
That pillar is super important to help us deal with the second pillar. So the second pillar is detecting, again, still not detecting abuse of AI, but detecting these attacks on endpoints and cloud and so on where the attacker is an AI, right? So just like in our space of detection and response, we're leveraging AI to be much better.
Mhm.
The other side, the attacking side, is also leveraging AI to become a better attacker. And I've seen some fantastic startups in this space recently. Again, startups are looking at it from the enterprise side. So penetration testing, red teaming, AppSec testing, all that stuff with AI. But the results are amazing. You can see the type of capture the flags that AI can do today, and it's mind blowing. And when this technology will become commoditized, 2-3 years out, the attackers will be using that all the time. And so what's going to happen?
That quickly? Wow. No, you just kind of floated past that, but 2 to 3 years. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised because we're further along now than we thought we were going to be a couple of years ago. So 2 to 3 years, actually, I guess it sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's going to be 4, but the reality is that generally speaking, hacker organizations don't invest in the most cutting edge R&D like startups do. But once enough startups, and there's probably a good couple dozens at least, who's already doing automated AI red teaming pen testing with AI. And so when these startups start to mature, some will do some open source, some will do that. The tech is gonna get commoditized. Maybe not the best tech, but the basic tech is gonna get commoditized. Okay. That's how every tech did. And so at that point, it will land in the hand of attackers. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to see this immense increase in volume of attacks because now AI is doing that, right? So instead of doing one phishing campaign, I can do 6,000 phishing campaigns, right? And so what does that mean? It means that all the tech that I built for AI helping detection and response is no longer going to be nice and optional to reduce some of the cost of the talent that I can't recruit. It's going to be necessary because people just won't be able to keep up with the pace in which AI is attacking. And we're going to see AI attacking and AI defending, and we're going to see this, craze. And both of these are super important, right? And so building not just the detection and the AI to help my current detection response, but building AI that can detect and respond to AI speed attacks.
Okay.
And that can respond in the sense of remediating, blocking, containing, because otherwise it won't be fast enough.
So leveraging AI as part of my overall security strategy, then pillar 2, kind of shifting to the fact that now I have to look at AI specific, enabled, enriched, whatever term you want to use, level attacks.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
And then we're getting to the third.
Okay.
The third is, and I think that's where most people today are concerned about, because this attack stuff, we still have 2-3 years until it's coming up. But the third is attackers attacking, whether manually or with AI, my new AI infrastructure.
Exactly.
So if I'm an enterprise today, I'm probably starting to use AI. At the very least, I'm using, SaaS AI, right? I'm using ChatGPT. I'm using Anthropic, Claude. I use Claude for coding and stuff like that. But a lot of organizations go beyond that. They're building new applications that leverage AI, right? I'm using Amazon Bedrock to integrate AI into my applications. I'm building MCPs that do all kinds of things. I'm building agentic AI. I'm building all these new services, applications, and so on that rely on AI and AI infrastructure. And if I was an attacker today, I would target those. You know why? Because whenever people start building a lot of new things with new technology, there are a lot of misconfiguration and new vulnerabilities and things people didn't. We still don't have good practices for securing all that. And especially with AI being so, willing, trying to please and giving you the data that it has access to, then we're going to see a lot of interesting attacks in this space.
Yeah. I was just at a conference in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, besides Pittsburgh, and there was several talks on vibe coding and people approaching writing relatively complex code with relatively basic or sometimes no coding expertise, certainly no security expertise as it relates to code. And they were just talking about this currently logarithmic increase in the amount of code that's getting sort of produced out there. And it's turning into an exponential increase because people are saying, oh, look what I can create. The security holes in that and the gaps, I think you're going to be able to drive a truck through at the beginning, and we'll adapt and we'll create better ways for folks to do that. But man, that onslaught is going to be like a kid in the candy store for attackers for sure.
I've been through this. This is, let's call it, the third technological wave I've been through from a security perspective. So I got into AppSec when AppSec was a new thing in 2000. And then I got into cloud security, right, a decade ago. And now this. And what's in common with all of these is that when some new technology or a new security concept comes in the first few years, there's tons of innovation, new attacks, new defenses, a lot of stuff. And then, it stabilizes, right, because the technology matures. And so these years are the most fun years as a technologist, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many opportunities to do new things, to come up with new things, to make up new attacks and build new defenses. And so we're at this point, but at the same time, the adoption is just infinitely faster than before. So when cloud was new, cloud adoption was amazing, but it's nothing like AI adoption right now.
No, for sure. I am 100% with you. So let me just recap your pillars. So the first one, I'm a secure organization. I want to use AI to improve our processes, our technology, our people, et cetera. It's just, to us, it's another tool to improve. 2, we've got bad guys using AI against us, and we want to be able to prevent and detect and respond to those types of attacks. And the third one is, my organization uses AI for a whole bunch of cool stuff. And chances are that stuff is going to be targeted as well. And I want to be able to prevent, detect, and respond to issues in there. So those are, at a high level, your three pillars. Is that about right? Did I capture that?
Yes. And even though you can call all of them AIDR, they're completely 3 different things.
Exactly. Yeah. The way you spelled it out is, I think, very coherent approach to understand that. Well, let's take one idea. So you mentioned AIDR specifically. Autonomous SOC, right? We're all hearing about that. We've been hearing about it for a while. Some people say it's good, bad. Usually folks are kind of in the middle. Where does that fall in this conversation?
Right. So that's the first pillar, right? Well, it's the first, and then it goes into the second pillar, right? So let's look at the SOC industry, right? SOC is probably the most overworked group in any security organization, right?
Yeah.
Even before AI came into our lives, SOC couldn't handle the amount of data volume, alerts, and noise they have to deal with. It's very hard to create a good detection engine that can really understand all the context and will always know on some weird behavior if it's malicious or legitimate. And so in favor of not missing attacks, vendors generally err for showing more, and that creates a lot of volume. And so we've, for a decade or more, we've all been building automations and contextualization and triaging and all that, but still SOCs are overworked. There's just not enough people in the world for all the SOC work that we need. And so one of the results of this, we've all seen in the last few years, there's this huge growth in MDRs, right? Managed detection and response. Why? Because most organizations just don't have enough SOCs, so they outsource the problem to an MDR vendor, and they've been working diligently on better automations, better context, using the same team for multiple customers. It's a great thing, but even they are overworked and struggling with that.
Yeah.
And so when AI came, and especially as some of the new models, the reasoning models started coming in, it became very apparent that a lot of this work can be done with AI, right? Because at the end of the day, especially at the tier one, right? The tier one, maybe the tier two SOC analysts, it's an entry-level job. The depth of knowledge is not huge usually, right? Again, people build their knowledge through that. So that's another issue we have to talk about. But when they come in, and there's a lot of context, like human context, right? Is this type of user, that type of user? Maybe I send an email and ask a question. Those are all things that LLM is really, really good at, right? And so taking this and letting AI now do the work of a SOC tier one analyst, it's here, right? It's already here. It's not a matter of the future. And so is it going to be perfect and never do a mistake? No, but let's be honest. Nobody who works in a SOC is perfect and never does a mistake. You try not to do a mistake on a shift work with repetitive, mundane work, and you see, humans do mistakes. It's fine. So LLM will do probably less mistakes, right? And so now, can they do tier two? Can they do tier three? Can they do tier four? Can it be fully autonomous, right? And I'm not sure I buy into the fully autonomous, but I'm also not sure I don't. I think we're still on, waiting to see where the qualities of AI and AGI may get to. But I think everybody's confident at this point that you can replace a lot of the manual labor with people, and let the people that can do the more advanced stuff focus on that. Granted, just like with anything else, right? Replacing junior developers with Cursor, replacing junior analysts with AI. So how do we train the juniors to be seniors? It's a big problem, but we'll put that aside from today's discussion.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think you spelled it out perfectly there. It's not a question of replacing people right now. It's certainly an augmentation capability, right? And people do naturally right now, people do some things better and AI does some things better. And the two working together, it's just it's a great combination. We'll see where the future takes that and how things evolve. But let's go ahead.
And honestly, I think, it's replacing people in the type of task that people don't want to do. I mean, we have, Mitiga offers its CDR as a managed offering as well. And we were already using those AI triage capabilities internally. And the team is super ecstatic because they don't have to do now all the grunt work of, triaging the same alerts that maybe, you can't get rid of, but they're noisy and so on. And they get to focus on investigating more interesting things, putting some more time into the more, contentious alerts and figuring out if it's a real issue or not. And so, it's a win-win. And we have such a big shortage in talent anyway. So, I wouldn't be worried about that.
My very first startup, RipTech, was at MSSP. And we used to tell people, the folks that are smart enough to tell the difference when looking at millions of logs between a false positive and a real attack, you can't pay enough to look at logs to tell the difference between a false positive and a real attack. They don't want to do that job. But let's put the Mitiga hat on. And I've already got it on, but let's put your Mitiga hat on for a second here. And let's talk about AI for detection and response and how we approach that. And maybe even share a little bit on how that's different from some of the other organizations, maybe competitors, but maybe even partners, but other people in the space that are trying to address this area as well.
So again, I think, we're trying to leverage what's out there for, the best models and best capabilities. I think most people agree that it's right to use the best models rather than train your own model and tune them and help them to work right in your context. And that's what we do, right? And so one of the benefits that we have, though, is that our platform was built from day one with a lot of context. And so this context and all the data that we have available, because we collect all your cloud telemetry, makes the AI very efficient, right? So if I'm building a generic autonomous SOC startup, right, and I'm taking alerts from millions of products, and I only have the alert, then it's harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's harder to be able to get the right data and the context I need for triage. And that's where the challenge, some of these startups have raised tens of millions of dollars to just this. And it's a big challenge. For us, we already have all your cloud data, and we've contextualized it, and we have all our understanding, and we have everything around that, and your user profile, and all the old AI stuff, the machine learning knowledge and all that in. And so that allows an LLM to very easily do the work with the context that we have. And so again, we take a standard model, but we have a lot of wrapping around it. We have a lot of instructions around it and guidance and all the data. And that makes it very efficient. And we get amazing results with it.
Yeah. And one of the things that's so special about this, and I've spoken with hundreds of customers now, is that it's not predicated on alerts. Building out your LLMs based on alert data. I'm not saying alerts are bad. Alerts are fine. Yeah, we pull in plenty of alerts. We get alerts from CrowdStrike and others, but doing it on logs across cloud infrastructure, across SaaS, across identity, and all the other gazillion of SaaS application types out there, it's really hard. It's really a difficult thing. But once you kind of crack that nut, you solve that equation of how to do that in a scalable way. Man, that's a really, really powerful LLM capability, I would think.
Yeah, and especially when you try to trace threat actors through different cloud services, every cloud service has a different way to showing their logs, different way to providing context. Who is the user? Is it one will show the username, one will show the email, one will show an ID, one will show an internal ID or an internal user string, and so on and so on, right? Even just something like who is the threat actor or the compromised user. And so, maybe 5 years from now, AGI will be so good, it can just figure out everything on its own from the logs like this, but we're not there yet. And AI really works better when you help it get the context, right?
Yeah.
So because of what we do in Mitiga, because we normalize all the data from all the different clouds into something that's more uniform, into something where all the identities, the entities are normalized, and we provide additional context around them and additional checks that we do and profiles. This really gives the LLM everything it needs to be able to perform at its best.
Yeah. Well, and you wrote a piece recently on social media about AWS changing their log schema, and everybody does it, and not everyone's ready for it. In fact, I would argue most people, unless you live in this world, you're probably not aware of it at all. But these things are always changing. We truncated fields 20 through 50 into one now, and we moved this over here, dropped that, added that. This is happening all the time. So it's not like a set and forget. This stuff is like constantly staying on top of it.
Right, and it's I have to hand it to AWS. They were great about it in the sense that they notified about it months ahead and provided good documentation. And I wish all vendors would be as forthcoming and diligent about changes in the logs. Some of the vendors just changed the log one day.
Yeah, that's right.
So we part of what we have, we build a schema. So one of the monitoring that we have every morning, we check that all the logs are as we expect them to be. And then every few days, one log has something new, a new field, which is, easy, or a removed field, or a changed field, or change structure, or whatever, right? So this is a whole big challenge.
Yeah. Well, it can be easy to forget that the people that are in charge of writing the logging systems for these types of SaaS applications, identity, cloud infrastructure, whatever, they don't really love doing this. This isn't the thing that everybody, I really want to write our logging mechanism. So it's sometimes it gets kind of kicked down the road till the 11th hour, and it's not as good as you'd like it. But that's a whole nother conversation. We can get to that.
It's another. I just want to add that I think that logging is an engineering task, right?
Yeah.
It's like you said, nobody cares about it, but there's also usually no product management around it. Mm-hmm. So you don't think about it as if it's a product that somebody's using. It's something that you need to do.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay. Well,
Let's go back to
well,
AI.
that's another question. So we kind of covered pillar one then, right? We're talking about how Mitiga will go ahead and leveraging AI for better DNR, right? So for detection and response. Let's go to your second pillar now, where we're talking about stopping these AI attackers. So first off, what's really different about them, and maybe kind of an add-on to what's different about them is, from our perspective, how does that manifest into how we do detection and response?
So, for many, many years, there's this saying that the average lurk time of an attacker is 200 days, right? So, maybe it's a little bit overdone, this number, but generally when we see threat actors, right, there's the technical attack, but there is, you want to get money out of that at the end of the day. So sensitive data, ransom, whatever. And so usually what happens, there's the first phase of the attack, people get access, and then it takes time until with that access, somebody actually looks at that, finds the relevant data, right? If I want to do a business email compromise, I need to wait for the right email. I need to find the right mailbox, the right thread, right? If I want to do ransomware and I want to do it right, I need to understand the organization. Where's the sensitive data? Where are the backups? How do I get rid of them before I do the ransom, right? All these things are the lurk time. It's not really lurk. It's reconnaissance. It's understanding. It's figuring out how to execute the attack. And part of the value that solutions like Mitiga give, right, and in other detection response spaces, if they're done well, is that if I'm able to catch the threat actor during that phase, I'm able to block them before they get to do damage, right? And so the whole notion of detection and response is, you can't prevent everything. It's just not realistic. But I can stop attacks very early and prevent their impact, prevent them from materializing into a real breach, right? And so this is the detection response. Now, is it weeks, days, hours? I don't know, but it takes time, right? It depends on the attack, but it takes time. Where's the problem with AI? AI is very diligent. It's very fast. It doesn't rest, and you can run 5,000 agents in parallel, right? And so I can have an agentic AI platform run through the entire reconnaissance phase and figuring out and getting the context, not just technical reconnaissance, but, oh, this is a financial transaction. It's interesting. Oh, this is sensitive data. That's where they do backup. That's who the admin is. They can do all that in minutes, right? And so that means that once we see more of these attacks, the detection and response piece has to be really fast. I have to detect the first agent, the first AI agent starting the reconnaissance and blocking it in a minute instead of in 2 hours, right? And so it doesn't change the actual work. The actual work is similar, but it just, it shortens the time. And one thing that it introduces that today is very contentious is the notion of autonomous or, non-human in the loop remediation. So today, still, even though a lot of our prospects are looking to see that Mitiga can remediate, and we can, of course, but still in the day-to-day deployment, most people want a human in the loop. Like, okay, I'll see that, somebody's going to approve on that change, and then we'll block that user because it's compromised, right?
Yeah.
If we want to do it in a minute, there's no time for people in the loop. And so I think that's going to be the biggest change in this second pillar.
I feel people are, a number of CISOs I've spoken with, and this is maybe just like even in the last quarter, have said they're being much more cavalier about this now. And not because they want to necessarily, but they think they have to. And this is a self-preservation thing in the role of the CISO, where they need that in case of emergency. Yes, do this thing. Now they're asking, hey, when you go ahead and do this remediation, if a mistake was made, I want to be able to roll that back, do a non-destructive approach to this. But they're saying, I need to react fast. And sometimes I'm going to make a mistake, but sometimes it's going to be needed. to be that quick reaction. And I think that the gauge is starting to go a little bit more to that, a little bit more quickly. So this conversation a few quarters from now or late this year, maybe even at Black Hat in a few weeks here, I think we're going to start finding people are going to be taking that approach more and more often.
Yeah, and I think finding more and more non-destructive, and even more than non-destructive, reversible remediation actions is key. We are 100% focused and committed to that. Because if it's reversible, then I can do a few things. One, I can always reverse, right? But two, I can make the reversal as easy as like, oh, some human is now triaging that. If the human decided that this wasn't actually a threat, then you can, immediately reverse without even talking to anybody. And I'll go now deeper. If an AI decided, so let's say I saw a threat, or I thought it was a threat, I did something to the user, but 2 minutes later, I realized, oh, it wasn't really a threat because I got more data, more context. It's like, oh, okay, now I get it. It could be a human, but it could be an AI.
Right.
Go, oh, now I get it. It's not a real threat. Okay,
yeah.
boom, I can reverse. And maybe the user will never have even noticed that they were blocked because I just disabled them for 2 minutes and then I re-enabled them, same password, same everything, didn't do a password reset. So it's completely reversible. No problem. Maybe I contained a machine, took it back in a minute, with load balancing and everything. Nobody noticed. So that's, I think, is where we should see the future.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense. So to kind of recap before we go into my final question here, we've talked about two of the three pillars. We've talked about how Mitiga uses AI for better detection response. Great. We've talked about how the bad guys are using AI, or it's an AI-centric attack, and how that's a little bit different and how that could be detected and responded to. So now let's talk about attacks on AI and kind of what, first of all, what does that really mean? Attacks on AI, is AI part of the cloud? Is it, where does that fall? But there seems to be this cavalcade of AI security startups out there today talking about securing AI and its model protection and inline blocking and maybe it's detection and response. But there's a lot of AI security companies out there. And if anybody walked around RSA earlier this year, and certainly Black Hat again in a few weeks, there's going to be a lot of talk about that. So first of all, what exactly does this mean? What are attacks on AI, and kind of what's the back end, and how can organizations like Mitiga help?
So I will say this: we could probably divide that into 10 subcategories, right?
Okay.
Because AI is so big, and again, there's a difference between attacking ChatGPT or your instance of ChatGPT versus attacking an AI model that you're training on your own, right? And so on. So we probably don't have time to dive into all of this spectrum. I think one of the things we see with the AI startups, and that's very again, that's how we see things in new spaces, is people look at the vertical, right? I'm looking at cloud or SaaS or AI, and they're trying to build a security stack that solves all the problem for it. Whereas what we see in security, that in a later stage, you start breaking it up in there's the posture, there's the prevention, there's the detection and response. Why? Because those are different personas in the organization, and they need different things, right? And so if I'm, building an AI security that does governance and secures your AI, I'm probably not an expert in detection and response and making that accessible to the SOC, right? And so on. So, there's always the horizontal versus vertical approach. But I think it's such a huge space. We're going to need a lot of things in here to deal with all of that. And again, even in that perspective, right? There's, again, prompt injection is one problem. Permissions is a big problem. Like, how do I verify that AI only gets in the response the data that I'm supposed to get versus somebody else, right? And it's not necessarily even a prompt injection. It could be just a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a really, really huge space. But I want to for a minute, even though I always love to talk about the really, really cutting edge stuff, but I want to talk about the most simplistic thing, right? If an attacker now compromised an identity, which is 70% of what we see in the cloud, and they use that compromised identity to start exfiltrating data from one of your AI services, that's not really a very sophisticated attack, but it's an attack that most organizations today are not going to be able to see, right? And so for me, AI detection and response is starting in that very, very simple thing and going all the way up to detecting more advanced and complicated things. And in that perspective, I think it's very much cloud, right? So again, I had this really intriguing discussion today about people building AI for on-prem, but probably 90% of the organizations are going to build their AI services in the cloud, right? On Bedrock, on Vertex, on Azure OpenAI. That's where most people are going to build it. It's part of their cloud infrastructure. It's another service like, S3, like their key management, like their database. Only it's a service that in the coming years, we're going to see a lot more interesting types of attacks. But it's still a service that suffers from everything the cloud suffers from, right? The identity compromise, the abuse, the misconfigurations, all that stuff that we still haven't completely solved for the cloud is for AI, and then all the extra stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
And this is part of the reason, I'm a big believer, obviously, that detection and response can't be siloed. You can't do just detection and response for SaaS, or just detection and response for cloud infrastructure, or just for identity, or just for AI, because the threat actors don't work in silos. They will come in, they will hack through your environment, they will get in through an identity or a misconfigured service or whatever, or through an AI service, and they will use that to go everywhere else. Yeah. What if I leverage your AI internally because it has permissions to go into your S3 buckets and give me data from there? Is that an attack on AI or attack on S3?
Yeah, that's such a critical point, because this whole notion of mesh and that everything is interconnected. And to your point, attackers don't care that the sales team cares about Salesforce, and HR cares about Workday, and all the developers care about GitHub. It's all interconnected. They're all tied together. And if you get in through one, you get into all of them, essentially, right? And secrets can be compromised in different areas and leveraged to get into other areas. And it's just everything that makes the cloud wonderful and makes people want to approach it is also the weakness that attackers use to exploit it. Is probably the best way to put that. Last thing I'll just ask you as we wrap up here. Mitiga is unique, I think, in that we're an AI first company. We've been doing this for a long time, whether it's Gen 1 or Gen 2, whatever you want to call it, for AI. There's a lot of Me Too companies out there bolting things on, which makes a lot of confusion for organizations looking to invest in controls. And let's just be very specific. We'll talk about detection and response leveraging AI. What are maybe some of the things customers should be asking when they're looking at detection and response capabilities in the cloud around AI? What are some ways for them to sort of separate reality from PowerPoint and vaporware?
So I think there's a lot of discussions on that right now. Part of the challenge of, again, the greatness of what you can do today with AI is that it doesn't introduce a big moat, right? So you can build a very cool app with AI in 2 days of vibe coding. But what's the problem is, if you could do it in 2 days, a bunch of other people can do it in 2 days, right? And so, and the challenge is, these things look really great. They don't necessarily scale well. They don't necessarily offer the depth, but people may buy into them because they look really great. And so I think when you want to look, is like, what is the value on top of somebody who just wrote a bunch of prompts around one of the big models to create something that seems to give value, right? So I know where it is in Mitiga. In Mitiga, it's the data lake. We have all this data that without it, the value of building prompts like this is substantially lower. We have the context, the normalization, all the stuff I mentioned before, which makes our ability to give value with AI, for when AI will attack us, all these things as are fundamentally lying on the data and the context, right?
Yeah.
And so if somebody else now will build something that demos great with some prompts, sure, maybe they can do it, but it won't give you the depth and fidelity that you need over time because it lacks that fundamental.
Yeah.
And so, whenever I see, and I get to see a lot of startups, whenever I see those startups, the first thing I'm trying to see is like, okay, did they just build something that I can build as well? Like it just worked. And I get these like, oh, we can build a startup now in 2 weeks without developers. Like, okay, so you're just really good at writing some good prompts. Amazing. Kudos for you. But this is not going to be a lasting edge or value over time.
Yeah.
Where some of these things have really complicated tech, but that means it took them longer than that to build it, right?
Yeah. Just putting AI on top of Vapor isn't like putting it on top of a massive, curated, contextualized data lake that's 3 years of scale and all the other complexities that go into it.
And also, I think it's super important to realize that in a lot of cases, this guidance that people give to AI to make one of the generic models give them value, they might discover that tomorrow's model, the GPT-5 or 6, we already know that guidance anyway, and you won't need it anymore, right? So again, the fundamentals, the value, making sure that you bring real value on top of it, you bake in real knowledge that's not, just a bunch of reading of articles online. So for instance, again, part of what comes into our AI is all our IR and research knowledge, right? And I mentioned this before, we have our MDR. So we run managed detection and response for our customers. We use our own AI for that. And whenever we see where this AI could do better, we leverage our experience and the depth of investigation that we did to improve that guidance, right? And so it's baking in a lot of this knowledge and capabilities.
Yeah. Much more so than a 2-week startup saying, "Hey, we're good at prompts," for sure. But no, that's good advice. Thank you for that, Ofer. And again, hey man, thanks for being a guest again on Mitiga Mic.
Thank you for having me. We'll probably meet again in the future.
Absolutely.